Thank you. Thank you for coming out. I wanted to first, thank this beautiful bookstore, Booksmith, for hosting the reading, my first reading. It's such a gorgeous bookstore. If you go over to the fiction section, you just have such a great sense of the kind of the great conversation of literature that gets done here. It's a beautiful place. And I wanted to thank Carly and Huffington Post for sponsoring this as well. And it's nice to see so many familiar faces, and it's also nice to see some unfamiliar faces. So it's not all family and friends. And so it's a great crowd. So it's actually a good-looking crowd. I don't know if you look at each other. Very handsome. And I wanted to thank everybody who's come in. My brother and sister-in-law came in from Texas, and I have lots of friends who came in also from the East Bay. So I wanted to applaud their sacrifice. Their many sacrifices. Okay, so I'm just going to read from the Working Theory of Love, the novel. I'm just going to start at the beginning, because it doesn't take any setup. And then I might end with just a little bit of a San Francisco thing, since we're in San Francisco. A few days ago, a fire truck and an ambulance pulled up to my apartment building on the South Hill overlooking Dolores Park. A group of paramedics got out, the largest of them bearing a black chair with red straps and buckles. They were coming from my upstairs neighbor, Fred, who was a drinker and a hermit, but who I've always held in a strange esteem. I wouldn't want to trade situations. He spends most of his time watching sports in the little flat-screen television perched at the end of his kitchen table. He smokes slowly and steadily. My ex-wife used to complain about the smell. Glued to tennis matches, basketball tournaments, football games, even soccer. He has no interest in the games themselves, only in the bets he places on them. His one regular visitor, the postman, is also his bookie. Is this too loud? I'm sorry. No? Okay. It's also his bookie. Fred is a former postal employee himself. As I say, I wouldn't want to trade situations. The solitariness and sameness of his days isn't alluring, and yet he's always been a model of self-sufficiency. He drinks too much and smokes too much, and if he eats at all, he's just heating up a can of Chunky. But he goes and fetches all of this himself, smokes, drink, Chunky, swinging his stiff legs down the hill to the corner store, and returning with one very laden paper bag. He then climbs the 4 flights of stairs to his apartment, a dirtier, more Spartan copy of mine, where he lives alone, itself no small feat in the brutal San Francisco rental market. He's always cordial in the steps, and even in the desperate few months after my divorce, when another neighbor suggested a revolving door for my apartment to accommodate high traffic, a snide comment, Fred gave me a polite berth. He knocked on my door once, but only to tell me that I should let him know if I could hear him banging around upstairs. He knew he had a heavy footfall. I took this to mean, we're neighbors and that's it, but you're all right with me, though maybe I read too much into it. When the paramedics got upstairs that day, there was the sound of muted voices, and then Fred let loose something between a squawk and a scream. I stepped into the hall, and by this time the paramedics were bringing him down, shouting at him, stirred as drill sergeants. "Sir, keep your arms in. Sir, keep your arms in. We will tie down your arms, sir." The scolding seemed excessive for an old man, but when they brought him around the landing, strapped tight to the stair stretcher, I could see the problem. He was grabbing for the balusters, trying to stop his descent. His face was wrecked, his milky eyes searching and terrified, leaking tears. "I'm sorry, Neil," he said when he saw me. He held his hands out to me, beseeching, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I told him not to be ridiculous. There was nothing to be sorry about. But he kept apologizing as the paramedics carried him past my door, secured to his medical bier. Apparently he had fallen 2 days earlier and broken his hip. He had only just called about it. For the previous 48 hours, he dragged himself around the floor, waiting for God knows what. The pain to go away? Someone to knock? I found out where he was staying, and he's already had surgery and is recuperating at a nice rehab facility. So that part of the story has all turned out well. But I keep thinking about that apology. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What was he apologizing for but his basic existence in the world? The inconvenience of his living and breathing. He was disoriented, of course, but the truth holds. He's not self-sufficient. He's just alone. This revelation shouldn't matter so much, shouldn't shift my life one way or the other, but it's been working on me in some subterranean manner. I seem to have been relying on Fred's example. My father, not otherwise much of an intellectual, had a favorite quote from Pascal: "The sole cause of man's unhappiness is his inability to sit quietly in his room." I had thought of Fred as someone who sat quietly in his room. Not everyone's life will be a great love story, I know that. My own starter marriage dissolved a couple of years ago. Aside from those first few months of the revolving door, I've spent much of the time since alone. I've had the occasional stretch of dating this or that young lady and sought the occasional solace of one-night stands, which can bring solace if the attitude is right. I've ramped my drinking sharply up and then sharply down. I make the grooves in my life that I roll along. Bachelorhood, I've learned, requires routine, small rituals that honor the unseen moments. I mean this without self-pity. Who should care that I pour exactly 2 glugs of cream into my first coffee, but only 1 into my second and last? No one, yet those 3 glugs are the very fabric of my morning. Routine is why I can't drink too much and why I've paradoxically become less spontaneous as a 36-year-old bachelor than I was as an even younger married man.